Europe is facing its greatest security challenge in generations. After years of peace and military downsizing, it's suddenly changing course. The goal is to spend 5% of GDP on defense. This isn't just a number, it's an alarm bell and a test of our continent's unity. The war beyond its eastern border and Russia's provocations towards NATO countries mean the spectre of conflict is no longer a theory. Europe is mobilizing unprecedented resources, political, financial, and social, to deter the aggressor, prepare for the worst, and maintain peace through joint efforts.
Of course, early in 1990, the Soviet Union collapsed, the Warsaw Pact fell apart, and everybody thought that we would live in peace for the rest of eternity.
When I came to NATO back in 2014, NATO's approach to Russia was deterrence, defense, and dialogue. We thought it was possible to talk to the Russians. Russia is our neighbor. We had to address the risk of misunderstandings, miscalculations. So we wanted dialogue with Russia, but based on strong deterrence and defense. It proved that it was not really possible to have a meaningful dialogue with Russia because Russia had decided to take control over neighbor, take control over Ukraine.
Well, Russia has established an expansionist neo-imperial state ideology with which it has brainwashed its soldiers, its children, its population. And in the beginning there is the word, and then the word becomes flesh, and it started invading its neighbors. First Georgia, now Ukraine.
Before 2030, Putin can be ready, what is called to test Article 5. It means to attack, whatever members of EU and NATO, and we need to be ready for that.
Just a few years ago, NATO's standard was for member states to allocate 2% of their GDP to defense, a target that many countries failed to meet. To date, this approach has been significantly re-evaluated. In June 2025, under pressure from the US, the Allies agreed to a drastic increase in spending up to 5% of GDP. A phased plan to reach this ceiling was put in place, with a target of 3.5% of GDP by 2035 for purely military spending. Then, a further 1.5% of GDP for critical infrastructure and defense facilities, from rail networks to airports and ports. This huge financial commitment is intended to restore to European armies capabilities they haven't had since the Cold War.
Ten proces dochodzenia do tej decyzji był wielowarstwowy. I oczywiście można powiedzieć, że to zabrało za dużo czasu. W tym sensie ja bym powiedział, że pewnego rodzaju korzystnym katalizatorem okazał się Donald J. Trump, tak, który wręcz zażądał, tak, tego, by kraje europejskie właśnie zadeklarowały tyle, ile on sobie życzy, żeby wydawały na obronność. Ale co ciekawe, nie zdołał wymóc żadnego mechanizmu takiego egzekwującego.
We convinced President Trump that actually NATO allies are stepping up. Trump is not against NATO. Trump is against NATO allies not paying enough for NATO. And that's a valid point. And actually the same message that also President Obama and President Biden has conveyed or have conveyed to NATO allies.
Możemy założyć, że jest to około 7% PKB, które zarówno Moskwa, jak i Pekin wydają na obronność. Czyli tutaj widzimy, że trzeba po prostu patrzeć, co robią potencjalni przeciwnicy i też dopasowywać nasze możliwości do tego, aby ten sprzęt modernizować, aby ten sprzęt też uzupełniać.
Kierunek jest słuszny, a czy on doprowadzi i kiedy do uzyskania właśnie tych zdolności, które byłyby w stanie przeciwstawić się jakiemuś poziomowi rosyjskiego zagrożenia w danym momencie czasu, no to niestety zobaczymy.
The NATO allies committed to dramatically increase their defense spending to that 5% of GDP. something that no one really thought possible. And they said, "You did it, sir, you did it." Well, I don't know if I did it, but I think I did. This will be known as the Hague Defense Commitment, which is pretty good, pretty appropriate. When the Allies reach this number, it will add more than $1 trillion a year. Think of that, $1 trillion per year.
Since February 2022, Russia has been openly seeking to destroy its neighbor. In practice, the war between Ukraine and Russia has been going on since 2014. Faced with fierce resistance from the Ukrainians, Moscow has not backed down from actions that increasingly undermine the security of the whole of Europe. This had a clear impact on decisions made by two countries that had so far remained outside the alliance.
Will be that a part of the drone wall built in Europe?
No, you have to take... I want to see that one. Excuse me, because there's a Russian helicopter flying there. It's not... well,
the sound?
Yeah, it goes every now and then, but... Yeah, most probably, yeah. Okay, let's do it again. What was the question?
Finland joined NATO in 2023. Sweden followed in 2024.
Then, of course, the accession of Finland and Sweden is a very important step forward in terms of coordination and our ability to hurt the Russians if we want to. So I think the situation is not worse, but better for NATO as a result of that. Is it therefore easy? Can we lean back and think there is no problem? No, of course not.
Russia's war with Ukraine is a war that is being fought in Europe. The continent is seeing incidents that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago, and which today pose the risk of accidentally drawing NATO into direct conflict with Russia. Combat drones and missiles falling on NATO territory, Russian aircraft violating airspace of member states, unidentified balloons crossing borders, little green men appearing out of nowhere, acts of sabotage and hybrid warfare, all of this shows that the conflict can affect us every day. The war is already here.
Jesteśmy w miejscu eksplozji niedaleko Garwolina, niedaleko stacji Mika. Eksplozji, która miała najprawdopodobniej na celu wysadzenie pociągu na trasie Warszawa-Dęblin. Nie ma niestety wątpliwości, że mamy do czynienia z aktem dywersji. Na szczęście nie doszło do tragedii, ale sprawa jest bardzo poważna.
My dzisiaj jesteśmy z braku lepszego słowa w trakcie tej wojny hybrydowej, ale poniżej progu wojny w klasycznym rozumieniu. Czyli nie latają rakiety, nie ma tego udziału tych powiedzmy efektorów kinetycznych, ale wszystko, co jest poniżej, de facto jest w użyciu. Mamy tysiące ataków cybernetycznych na nasze sieci wojskowe, na nasze urzędy, w ogóle na państwo. Mamy sytuację na granicy, gdzie jest w tej chwili 5000 polskich żołnierzy. Mamy rozmaite inne sytuacje, które nas spotykają, czyli kwestie na przykład sabotaży, które dzieją się w Polsce. Właściwie w każdym tygodniu albo w każdym miesiącu łapiemy jakiegoś sabotażystę, który za rosyjskie pieniądze został wynajęty, żeby coś w Polsce zniszczyć, podpalić, zepsuć. A to jest tylko wstęp do tego, co się może dziać. Mamy drony nad najważniejszymi lotniskami w Europie. Ale to ciągle jest poniżej tego progu klasycznej wojny. I mam nadzieję, że nigdy ten próg nie zostanie przekroczony. I wszystko w tej sprawie zależy od nas. Zależy od Europy. Zależy od tego, czy właśnie Europa będzie wydawała na swoje bezpieczeństwo pieniądze, będzie budowała swoje siły zbrojne, czy nie.
Мы не собираемся воевать с Европой, я уже об этом 100 раз сказал. Но если Европа вдруг захочет с нами воевать и начнет, мы готовы прямо сейчас. Здесь не может быть никаких сомнений. Только вопрос в чем? Если Европа вдруг начнет с нами войну, мне кажется, что очень быстро, это же не Украина. С Украиной мы там действуем хирургическим способом, аккуратненько, так? Чтобы понятно, да? Это не война в прямом, современном смысле этого слова. Если Европа вдруг захочет начать с нами войну и начнет ее, то очень может быстро произойти ситуация, при которой нам не с кем будет договариваться.
Russia is already at war with Europe. And Putin has been candid about his desire to show that NATO is a paper tiger. And he wants to show that Article 5 is nothing more than a paper tiger. There is good news and bad news. Let's start with the bad news. The bad news is that Russia again has been challenging Europe and the West and NATO, not only in Poland, but we also saw in the Baltic states, Romania, and this is part of Russian shadow war and hybrid war that includes not only incursions with drones, but also sabotage activities all over Europe.
You definitely can say we are no longer at peace. But we are sort of still in a gray zone between that and real war, traditional classical war. But then, of course, we see hybrid actions from Russia and China, by the way. And those are they became more and more clear in the summer of 2024 when there was the cable disruptions, arson in Poland. The murder attempt on the CEO of Rheinmetall, those packages in the DHL aircraft, which were actually very dangerous and could start a fire as well.
Russia is not going to start a war, full-fledged war, because it would lose, it knows it. But it is testing out, call it hybrid, call it Marianne. But it's below the threshold of full war, and we can expect more of this because that's an old, still Leninist adagio. You know, you push with the bayonet until you encounter a resistance. So we need to invest and fast. We can do it, but this is not, I think, something which people should just discuss. You know, this should be produced, and the appropriate units should be equipped with that. And that concerns not just the frontier states, such as Poland, but many other countries.
Take, for example, the events of September 2025. Overnight on September the 9th, a group of Russian drones violated Polish airspace during a massive attack on Ukrainian border towns. Some of the machines flew over Poland directly from Belarusian territory. The route was chosen to provocatively cross the NATO border. The Polish military, in consultation with its allies, reacted immediately. Several drones were shot down by fighter jets, and the wreckage fell in a dozen or so towns in various regions of the country. Romania, which borders Ukraine along the Danube, experienced similar incidents, with fragments of Russian drones and missiles repeatedly falling there after straying or deliberately entering Romanian territory. Similar incidents occurred in Latvia. In Estonia, Russian fighter jets violated the country's airspace. In Lithuania, the authorities have announced a state of emergency after smuggling balloons crossed the border from Belarus. Although NATO has always emphasized that it doesn't appear to be an intentional attack by Russia on a member of the alliance, the constant provocations are extremely dangerous and could easily lead to tragedy.
Those provocations against Poland, against the drones coming into Lithuania, Romania, or some other countries.
Disrupting work of the airports.
Yeah, airports and so on. They have shown several things. First of all, that our capabilities to detect drones are very limited, and we need to learn from Ukraine a lot here, because we have, radars which can see aircrafts or maybe missiles, but drones are specific, You need to have special radars or so-called acoustic detection systems, which Ukrainians established. And second, we do not have proper means to destroy drones in what we call in a cost-effective way. What we have shown again, Polish example, yes, NATO and Poland reacted in a very effective way, but they were using, 1 million value missiles to destroy the drone, which costs, 10,000.
All these things, I think, are not only to test us and to see whether we actually detect it and then respond in whatever way we want by creating a sort of chaos or a situation where people do not feel secure anymore because of what is happening. And you could start a debate where people start to say, so why should we give away all these weapons to Ukraine when we actually need them ourselves because of the threat that is out there? So then he has achieved something without fighting a war.
Владимир Владимирович, а зачем вы в Данию столько дронов посылаете?
Не буду больше.
Да, не надо больше.
Больше не буду.
Вот.
Не буду больше ни во Францию, ни в Данию, ни в Копенгаген. Куда еще-то летают? На это самое,
да там, везде долетают.
Да, в Лиссабон, и куда они летают? И, вы знаете, там развлекаются люди, которые когда-то развлекались по поводу неопознанных летающих объектов, НЛО. Но там столько чудаков, как и у нас, кстати говоря. Ничем не отличаются, особенно молодые люди. Там они сейчас будут запускать вам каждый день. Каждый день, боже мой. Вот и пусть ловят там все это. Как вы понимаете, если серьезно, у нас и дронов-то нет, которые до Лиссабона долетают. Но есть определенные и большой дальности, но целей там нету, что самое-то главное. Вот в чем дело. Но это тоже один из способов нагнетания обстановки в целом, чтобы выполнить указания Вашингтонского обкома и повысить расходы на оборону. Граждане этих стран должны понимать, что это рискованная игра. Все это истерия нагнетается.
Ну, вы сейчас вот Португалию напугали. Лиссабон-то упомянули. Там сейчас еще с умом не очень вообще. В общем, шутка это была, если что, шутка. Так, пожалуйста.
Нет,
дальше.
Какая же шутка?
Нет?
Нет.
Тогда извините, да. Тогда предупредили, это тоже честно.
Да.
По-джентльменски, да.
Предупрежден, значит вооружен.
All of Europe, from east to west, is taking up the gauntlet. Frontline states are maximizing their spending. At the same time, Western countries are developing long-term programs. The European Union is beginning to treat defense as a priority. Central and Eastern Europe have been sounding the alarm since the beginning of the war in Ukraine. Percentage-wise, Poland has taken the lead on defense spending. It raised it to around 3.9% of GDP in 2023, the highest level in the EU, then to 4.2% in 2024 and 4.7% in 2025. And this is just the beginning.
Or to secure continued US commitment to NATO is to ensure fair burden sharing, meaning that European allies have to invest more in defense. And that's exactly what they're doing. And Poland is leading by example, spending more than 4% of GDP on defense. And we need more allies to spend even more. And that's the best way also to secure continued US commitment to NATO.
Well, Polish defense industry is a pillar already. Not that we want to become a pillar of the European security. We've been a strong ally inside NATO. We became one of the main players when it comes to supporting Ukraine. Well, more than 50, more than 60, more than 70% of the aid that is given to Ukraine by NATO members goes through Poland. We have changed completely the logistics hub in Rzeszów, in example. So this is one example of how Poland helps and how Poland developed itself and how we became this pillar, the stronger pillar than before. And when it comes to the industry, we've been the pillar and we are going to be bigger and stronger than we are now.
Pamiętajmy też, że nie budujemy zdolności po prostu dla Ministerstwa Obrony. My budujemy zdolność dla państwa polskiego. I to nie jest przypadek, że Polska wydaje niemalże 5% PKB na obronność. To jest raczej oczywiste wtedy, kiedy spojrzymy na mapę. Polska jest jedynym krajem w Europie, który graniczy jednocześnie z Białorusią, Rosją i Ukrainą. Chcielibyśmy zawsze, żeby tych środków było jeszcze więcej, ale wydaje się, że to jest już niemożliwe.
In both France and Germany, citizens have been accustomed for generations to the state investing more in social welfare, healthcare and civil infrastructure. The army has remained somewhere in the background. Raising spending to 5% of GDP is a huge political challenge, especially when the public is not fully aware. of the real threat.
So we went to Afghanistan because the US is our pillar of our foreign security policy. We went to the Sahel zone because we are very close ally with France. We went to the Baltic as a lead nation of the enhanced forward presence of NATO because Germany wanted to be the ally of the smaller and medium-sized countries. In the military, there was a threat perception, but in the overall population, there was no military threat perception. So the Germans felt threatened by climate change, economic problems, migration, many things. But there was no military threat perception. When Russia invaded again Ukraine in 2022, for many Germans it felt like this is really about us. They might arrive here. So it was perceived not only as an attack on Ukraine, but as an attack on Europe and on our acquis in Europe and what actually constitutes us. So it was really, and that's for me a core element of Zeitenwende, it was a recognition we do security policy not to be a nice partner, but because it's about us. And if that's the case, if there's really a major issue with our security, survival, or whatever you want to call it, then spontaneously things become possible that were totally impossible before.
Jeśli chodzi o kwestie bezpieczeństwa, zwłaszcza tego militarnego, twardego, no to konieczne jest porozumienie Francji, Niemiec, Wielkiej Brytanii, krajów skandynawskich, które na pewno zyskują bardzo dużo w tej chwili na znaczeniu, oczywiście wskutek wejścia Szwecji i Finlandii do NATO. No a można powiedzieć, że bardzo się cieszymy, że ta zachodnioeuropejska masa krytyczna zaczęła podążać w kierunku wytyczonym przez kraje wschodniej flanki, w tym przez Polskę.
American priority right now is China. Having said that, Europe will be left on its own to defend itself from Russia, and splitting alliance between Europe and the United States is the last thing that we need right now. We don't want to wait, for China to escalate further. Now is the time for European leaders to show China that that Beijing cannot overwhelm, Europe with security and economic threats, and also to send a costly signal to Washington that the alliance still exists.
Our allies are not children. They're nations capable of doing far more for themselves than they have. It's time they stand up, and they are. In fact, many of them are nations who have proud and powerful martial traditions of their own, and we should treat them that way. We can and should and must expect them to do their part exactly as President Trump has. Model allies that step up, like Israel, South Korea, Poland, increasingly Germany, the Baltics, and others, will receive our special favor. Allies that do not, allies that still fail to do their part for collective defense, will face consequences. President Trump makes sense to me.
So we shall do that. It will cost money, but again, we need to remember that economically, yes, we are a little bit below United States in terms of our general GDP. But if you compare with Russia, so we are 10 times richer. If we're adding United States, we are 25 times richer than Russia.
Leaders must decide which civilian spending to cut in order to ensure security. Britain is discussing the need to reach 3%. Similarly, Italy, which traditionally spends around 1.5% of GDP, has announced an increase in its defense budget. France spends 2%, while Germany, Europe's largest economy, isn't planning to reach 3.5% until 2029. The pace of these changes is slow, too slow. The countries on the eastern flank understand this and view the sluggish pace with concern. But despite their differences, all 32 NATO countries have agreed on the validity of the target of 5% of GDP for defense, with just one exception: Spain.
We're going to work together very closely with Finland and with NATO. We have a very good relationship. As you know, I requested that they pay 5%, not 2%. And most people thought that was not going to happen, and it happened virtually unanimously. We had one laggard. It was Spain. Spain. You have to call them and find why are they a laggard. And they're doing well, too. The funny thing, because of a lot of the things we've done, they're doing fine. They have no excuse not to do this, but that's all right. maybe you should throw them out of NATO, frankly.
Dla niektórych państw zakupy sprzętu amerykańskiego są pewnego rodzaju inwestycją w te relacje po to właśnie, aby wojska amerykańskie nie wycofały się z Europy, a wiemy przecież, że już pewne zapowiedzi w tym kierunku ograniczenia liczebności wojsk pojawiły się chociażby w stosunku do państw bałtyckich czy też Rumunii. Póki co takich głosów w stosunku do obecności żołnierzy amerykańskich na terenie Polski nie ma. Niemniej to jest właśnie też taka zachęta, inwestycja, taki wkład państw członkowskich w te relacje transatlantyckie.
Chcielibyśmy, żeby wszystkie kraje zdawały sobie sprawę, że problemy, które dzisiaj dotyczą na przykład Polski, jutro mogą dotyczyć na przykład Hiszpanii. I to jest nasz punkt widzenia i zresztą po tym, jak pojawiają się drony nad różnymi lotniskami na świecie, ostatnio właśnie w Danii, czy w Niemczech, czy w Wielkiej Brytanii, no to widać, że to nie jest problem czy temat flanki wschodniej NATO.
Ta świadomość jeszcze wciąż nie jest powszechna. Mało tego, również na poziomie tych elit politycznych. Tak? No, ten najbardziej, że tak powiem, dobitny przypadek Hiszpanii, która odmówiła na szczycie NATO podpisania się pod tą deklaracją dotyczącą 3,5 plus 1,5% PKB, twierdząc, że no, ona będzie w stanie wypełniać te wszystkie zobowiązania za swój poziom wydatków obronnych, który w tej chwili oscyluje gdzieś tam na poziomie 2%, a każde jego podwyższenie wiązałoby się, zdaje się, że premier Sanchez używał takiego sformułowania, z naruszeniem stylu życia Hiszpanów.
Western Europe is adapting to the new situation, though differently than the frontline Eastern countries. In Europe, Poland is emerging as one of the most important links in strengthening NATO's eastern flank. Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski appealed for the threat to be taken seriously as early as 2008, after Russia's invasion of Georgia. And after Russia's attack on Crimea in 2014, he warned that a policy of concessions would only embolden Putin. Finally, in 2025, he reminded the UN that the unity of the Allies and their readiness to use force is the only language the Kremlin understands.
If I'm looking backwards in 2014, when Putin invaded Crimea, and Poland was the one to raise alert in Brussels that something very dangerous is going on and we have to stop him, there was no common understanding among the member states that we should react.
Poland has been supporting Ukraine since the very, very beginning of this full-scale invasion, or even before. It was one of the first countries to support Ukraine, while other countries were sending helmets. We've been sending, we were sending at that time tanks and aircraft to support militarily Ukraine in the fight with Russian occupation, with Russian aggression.
The European Union has done more for Ukraine than I would have anticipated before the war. The European Peace Facility was not designed to help third countries to arm other armies. We have now passed on to Ukraine around 200 billion euros. I didn't foresee that. So yes, Europe has become serious about defense. We are now spending, as the European pillar of NATO, twice what we were spending per annum during Donald Trump's first presidency. And I hope people understand that Russia is dangerous as long as it has an authoritarian expansionist state ideology.
At its meeting on May the 27th, the Council of the European Union adopted a regulation establishing a low-interest loan facility for the joint purchase of armaments. The military equipment would have to be manufactured by companies based in the EU, European Economic Community, or the European Free Trade Association, or in Ukraine. The financial instrument is called Security Action for Europe, or SAFE for short. This mechanism is the most important part of the European Commission's Rearm Europe plan and the white paper for European defence presented in March 2025.
The SAFE mechanism was the biggest success of the Polish presidency. We were the one to raise the word security as the most important word inside of the EU, and we were the one. The role of the presidency is to sit at the top of the table and conduct the whole discussion between the member states and achieve the compromise. And we, as the Polish presidency, achieved the compromise among the SAFE mechanism in 72 days. It's a world record. There were no programs like this which were decided in such a short time period. So it was a success of Polish presidency, but of course it's not the main goal for all member states. It's 150 billion euro. There has never been such amount of money inside of the EU for the defense spending.
Cały proces planowania wydatków na modernizację armii jest to proces, który ma bardzo wiele punktów decyzyjnych. Na samym początku powstaje on w sztabie generalnym, później minister obrony i aż do poziomu de facto prezydenta, bo mówimy tutaj o setkach miliardów złotych, które muszą być wydatkowane w sposób głęboko przemyślany. Najważniejsze jest to, żeby nie było białych plam. Nie ma problemu dublowania się, bo nigdy nie będzie zbyt dużo samolotów myśliwskich, albo zbyt dużo fregat, albo zbyt dużo systemów antyrakietowych. Nie ma problemu z nadpodażą. Ale ważne jest to, żeby nie było właśnie takich białych plam, żeby gdzieś nie okazało się, że nie ma jakiejś zdolności.
And the one to coordinate the needs and coordinate the plans is here NATO, because most of the member states are also the part of the NATO, so they are the one to coordinate the cooperation between the armies. What we can do inside of the EU as a member state is that we can coordinate between the governments the plans for the common procurement, or we are finding clients for our products coming from our industry, but we are not the one to make the final decision for other member states what they need.
In the European initiatives, one of them is the incentive scheme to push several countries to buy the same products, joint procurement. Maybe having only one single program for a frigate or for a battle tank. This is ambitious and maybe utopist. But pushing countries, several countries, to buy the same product, this makes sense. And there are incentive schemes in the SAFE plan for this. It will save money, it will be efficient operationally, it will give interoperability, maintenance synergies. So this is what we should do. So one radar bought by several countries at the same time, that makes sense. And this is exactly what the incentive scheme of European Commission is trying to push with SAFE.
So that's an extremely fast procedure, something that we have never seen before, which shows also the urgency and the need of everyone to collaborate and to cooperate. But the SAFE mechanism is something different than the 5% GDP. As far as we understand the law, 5% GDP and SAFE, they do not go in parallel. This is a separate budget, and the 5% GDP that come from the state budget can be spent on buying the equipment directly from the non-European countries, as you said, Americans, an example, or Japanese. But when it comes to SAFE will be monitored, all the spends from SAFE will be monitored, would be monitored by the European Commission at the end.
Europe is investing its own strategic autonomy, and an autonomous arms industry is a key piece of the puzzle. Thales, Rheinmetall, Leonardo, Saab, Airbus, Safran, Kongsberg, Fincantieri Naval Group, the Polish Armaments Group, and Britain's BEA and Rolls-Royce are just some of the largest companies operating in the European Union and the United Kingdom. In their hands lies a great responsibility and, in fact, our future security.
What is important about the SAFE mechanism, and it also gives a new impulse to the defense market, is that if you are buying something under SAFE mechanism, 65% of the product should be made inside of EOG.
We need European preference. We need European preference not for industrial reasons, but for operational, for military reasons. When you are close to war, or when you want to prepare to war, it's very important that the defense systems can be maintained, repaired, but can be also modified at the closest point from the front line. And you need to be able to modify because the threat is evolving all the time with new kind of drones, new kind of missiles. So you need to be able to modify the systems as close as possible from the front line. And this is why we need to have European preference, not only European production, but also European design. We have increased our production capability for radars, multiplied by 3 or 4. We have increased our capabilities of production for rockets, for missile. We have increased our capability for the equipment chipset for Rafale air fighter or for battle tanks. And multiplied by 3, multiplied by 4. And this is the increase of production. It has a very large cost because we have improved our industrial capability, we have strengthened the supply chain, and we have recruited a lot of people.
We have international partnerships for, I think, more than 20 years now. We started with the French in the radar domain. Then we have a great international cooperation with the Koreans, the Brits, and the Germans when it comes to the Crab, our howitzer 155 on a tracked chassis, which is produced in HSW. And we are producing more of this equipment for, I think, 2 or 3 years now. Of course, we have also Borsuk, our infantry fighting vehicle of the new generation with 30mm turret, completely Polish design, Polish IPR, and we are increasing the production month by month. Another thing when it comes to increase is the ammunition production, the 155. This is, I would say, a joint European thing to ramp up the production of the 155, as we can see in Ukraine. The traditional artillery, the gods of the war, does the job. So we are producing the artillery rounds, the 155mm, all over Europe and all over the world.
What we see today as a real demand from the different European countries is first air defense. Air defense systems with air surveillance, air defense radars, command and control, and missile to target what is a threat, which can be drones, which can be ballistic missiles, which can be helicopter or fighters. So air defense is one of the clear demand everywhere in Europe these days. The second thing is ammunition and stock for rockets, mortars, missiles, and fuels. This is a clear demand as well for quantities of ammunition.
Well, there are 2 priorities or even 3 priorities. First of all, the heavy equipment, which we are one of the leaders in Europe when it comes to the production. So artillery, 155, howitzers, the Crabs. Very good example. They're doing a great job in Ukraine. They're doing a very good job in Poland. And we have export clients who are interested in getting our 155 howitzers. So this is one thing. Second point is, of course, is the anti-drone defense and production of drones. This is something that we have to ramp up when it comes to production and knowledge inside PGZ. But in Europe, we have good manufacturers of drones. But what we have to do for sure is to learn from our Ukrainian brothers and partners how to produce drones in the most effective way. Because I think that in Ukraine there is a new model of the drone, if not every day, almost every week. So this is something that we should be focusing on. And the third thing, which is very important, I think, for all of us, is to teach us, the citizens, the civilians, how to defend ourselves, how to be prepared for something that can come one day. Hopefully it would not.
My jesteśmy w pewnym procesie, który może okazać się również bolesny dla niektórych krajów, tak? Bo gdyby uznać, że celem jest właśnie głębsza integracja, efekt synergii, tak? Efekt skali, no to pewnie byśmy się zastanowili, tak? Czy każdy musi produkować karabinek, czy każdy kraj musi produkować swoją własną platformę kołową, czy opancerzoną, czy nie. Czy potrzebne nam jest tyle, że tak powiem, konstrukcji haubic 155 mm. No, tylko właśnie to jest bardzo trudne, żeby dojść do takiego porozumienia i ustalić, a co w zamian, tak? Jeżeli byśmy próbowali dokonać takiego podziału, no dobra, to my robimy to, wy robicie tamto, dzielimy się nawzajem tym, co każdy z nas robi. To jest niezwykle trudne, to jest pewnego rodzaju wciąż ambicja, gdzieś tam widać i słychać echo tego rodzaju, no właśnie, ambicji w tych dokumentach unijnych, ale no, ja szczerze mówiąc jestem sceptyczny, by kraje członkowskie, by każdy poszczególny kraj, tak, był w stanie zrezygnować z swojej własnej fabryki czegoś tam na rzecz tego, by to coś produkował sąsiad i od niego było to kupowane. Mi się wydaje, że to będzie bardzo trudne.
5% of GDP is an insurance policy for a free Europe. It's a costly and politically difficult decision. It doesn't have the full support of voters in many countries. But the stakes are high: the security of the continent's citizens and the survival of democratic values. Europe doesn't want war, but it is ready to prevent it and, if necessary, to win it.
Rosja tak naprawdę nie zrealizowała żadnego strategicznego celu, atakując Ukrainę. Chciała zamknąć sprawę w kilka dni, jest tam 4 lata, straciła 1 milion obywateli, ma zrujnowaną gospodarkę i wcale nie jest potęgą. Jest na wyprzedaży u kolegów z Chin, bo dzisiaj można naprawdę na wyprzedaży kupić Rosję, jeżeli się jest szefem Chińskiej Partii Ludowej. I tak to wygląda. I nie wiem, czy Rosja chciała taki stan osiągnąć. Z drugiej strony mamy NATO, nowych członków NATO, czyli Finlandię i Szwecję. Mamy zwiększone wydatki obronne do 2, 3, 4%, 5% PKB. Mamy rosnące armie w Europie i na pewno nie jest to dobry znak dla Rosji. Więc po prostu róbmy swoje, a nigdy wojna do nas nie zawita.
Either we shall have, Europe which will become more and more able to have, sustainable peace, or we shall have Europe going totally into the chaos, with Russia becoming, even more aggressive and so on and so on. So that's why I'm saying, very, very, very clearly, and this is, my absolute, conviction that now in Ukraine, really, you are, doing a great job in bringing for Europe much more clear perspective. It will be painful, it will cost a lot, but that is, what will happen. And again, I can be just grateful to Ukraine and to Ukrainian people.
Well, we need to buy the equipment, build the ammunition factories, also incorporate the lessons from the Ukraine war and create a drone capacity that can protect Europe from Russian drones and missiles. If we do all this by the end of the decade, then Putin would be mad to attack us. I have only one request to the Russian government. If another missile or aircraft enters our space without permission, deliberately or by mistake, and gets shot down and the wreckage falls on NATO territory, please don't come here to whine about it. You have been warned. Thank you.